The massive waves slammed into us, pulling us under the churning ocean, and in that terrifying darkness Sarah's hands grabbed my face, and her lips pressed against mine in a kiss that defied every label we had ever known. Gasping as we broke the surface on the California shore, I stared at my childhood best friend in shock, wondering if the ocean had stolen our friendship forever. My heart pounded not just from the near drowning, but from the realization that nothing would ever be the same between us again. Salt water stung my eyes, but it was nothing compared to the burn of that unexpected touch still lingering on my mouth. Sarah coughed and laughed it off like it was nothing, just the rush of survival, but her cheeks were flushed in a way I had never seen in 23 years of knowing her. We had driven 6 hours from our quiet Central Valley town to this stretch of Big Sur coast for what was supposed to be a simple escape, a girl's trip to celebrate her promotion at the elementary school where she taught 2nd grade. I was the graphic designer stuck in a dead-end job at a local print shop, always the quiet one who listened while Sarah lit up every room. From kindergarten playdates to high school sleepovers, we had been inseparable, the kind of friends who finished each other's sentences and knew every secret, except the one I buried so deep I almost forgot it existed. My family was strict church, every Sunday potlucks with the pastor and endless talks about God's plan for marriage and kids. Sarah's family was the same solid working-class Catholics who expected her to settle down with a good man and start a family. She had dated boys through college, even got engaged once before calling it off last year, saying she needed space. I never dated anyone seriously, always claiming I was too focused on work. The truth was simpler and scarier. I had carried a quiet ache for Sarah since we were teens, but I pushed it down, convinced it was just admiration because she was straight and I could not risk losing her or facing the shame that would swallow my whole world. Now here we were dripping on the sand, her hand still clutching my arm as if letting go would send us back under. What was that I managed to say, my voice hoarse from the salt? Sarah wiped her face and shrugged. Adrenaline, I guess you almost went under and I just reacted. Her eyes would not meet mine fully though, and that tiny hesitation told me she felt it too, whatever it was. We walked back to our rented beach house in silence, the late afternoon sun warming our wet clothes but doing nothing to thaw the ice forming between us. Inside, I changed in the bathroom, staring at my reflection, wondering if the kiss had been visible on my skin like a brand. When I came out, Sarah was already on the couch scrolling her phone, pretending everything was normal. We ordered takeout and ate in front of the TV, talking about work and the weather, anything but what had happened. That night I lay awake listening to the waves outside, replaying the moment, her lips soft and urgent, her fingers pressing into my cheeks like she had been waiting years to do it. By morning the tension had not eased. We decided to hike the coastal trail to clear our heads, but every shared glance, every accidental brush of hands felt loaded. Sarah kept saying it was nothing, just a crazy second, but her voice cracked when she said it, and I knew she was lying to herself as much as to me. On the trail a sudden gust of wind nearly knocked us off balance, and she grabbed my waist to steady me, holding on longer than necessary. Gloria, she whispered later as we sat on a cliff edge looking out at the endless Pacific, I don't know what came over me yesterday, but I can't stop thinking about it. My stomach flipped. What do you mean? I asked, heart racing. She looked away, tears in her eyes. I have always seen you as my safe place, my sister, almost, but yesterday when the wave hit, and I thought I might lose you, something broke open inside me. I don't understand it, I have never felt this for a woman before. I wanted to tell her I had felt it for years, that every movie night and every hug had been torture and relief at the same time, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead I said maybe it was the fear talking and we should just forget it. She nodded, but the air between us had shifted forever. The rest of the trip passed in a blur of forced normalcy, beach walks, quiet dinners, and long silences that screamed louder than words. On our last evening Sarah suggested one more swim at sunset. The water was calmer this time, but when a small swell lifted us I saw the same look in her eyes. She did not kiss me again, but she held my hand under the water, squeezing it like a promise and a plea. Driving home the next day, the radio playing soft rock, I stared out the window wondering how we would face our families, our church community, our entire lives built on the assumption that we were just two straight girls who happened to be best friends. Sarah dropped me off at my apartment with a quick hug that lingered and whispered, we will figure this out, Gloria, I promise. But as I watched her car disappear down the street, I knew the wave had not just crashed on the beach, it had crashed through every wall I had built to protect my heart, and now the flood was coming for us both. The next weeks at home were a slow torture. I threw myself into work redesigning logos for local businesses, trying to drown the memory, but every text from Sarah asking if I was okay only made it worse. My mother noticed I was quiet at Sunday dinner and asked if I was seeing anyone new. I lied and said no, just tired. Sarah called one night, her voice shaky, saying she had gone on a blind date set up by her aunt, and it felt wrong, like she was betraying something she could not name. We met for coffee in a park on the edge of town, sitting on a bench far from prying eyes. She reached for my hand under the table and I let her. "Gloria, I think I might be falling for you," she said, her eyes searching mine. The words hung there, beautiful and terrifying. I wanted to say I had already fallen years ago, but fear clamped down hard. "What about your family? What about mine?" I whispered. "They would never accept this." Sarah squeezed my fingers tighter. "Maybe we do not have to tell them yet. Maybe we can just see where this goes." That night I barely slept, the weight of possibility pressing on my chest like the ocean itself. I knew then that our friendship had already drowned and something new and fragile was struggling to surface, but the current was pulling us toward rocks I was not sure we could survive. Back in our small Central Valley town, the secret started to eat at us like rust on old metal. Sarah and I texted constantly during the day, but saw each other only in careful public places: the grocery store, the library, where we could pretend it was just normal best friend time. At night, though, the messages turned deeper, confessions of confusion and longing that made my pulse race. She admitted she had replayed the kiss 100 times, questioning everything she thought she knew about herself. I shared how I had hidden my feelings since high school, scared that admitting them would shatter the only family I had ever known. My father was a deacon at the local Baptist church, and my mother volunteered in the youth group teaching girls that God's design was man and woman, period. Sarah's parents were even stricter, her dad a retired cop who quoted scripture like it was law. The idea of telling them felt impossible. Yet every time Sarah said my name in a text, my resolve weakened. One Friday after work, she showed up at my apartment unannounced with takeout Thai food and a bottle of sparkling water, because neither of us drank. We sat on the floor eating straight from the cartons, and the conversation flowed until it hit the wall we had been avoiding. "Gloria, what if this is real?" she asked, setting her fork down. "What if the wave just woke something up that was always there?" I looked at her across the dim light of my living room, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes full of the same storm I felt inside. "I think it is real," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "but that does not make it easy. Families break over less than this." She scooted closer and rested her head on my shoulder. "Then we will protect it until we are strong enough to face them." That weekend we drove to a state park 2 hours away where no one knew us, and spent the day hiking hand in hand when the trails were empty. It felt like freedom, stolen moments of laughter and soft kisses when no one was looking. Sarah was hesitant at first, but each touch seemed to unlock more of her, and I watched in awe as the straight girl I had known for decades became someone new and brave. On the drive home, though, reality crashed back. Her phone buzzed with a call from her mother asking why she had not been to family dinner. Sarah lied, saying she was busy with lesson plans, but the guilt in her voice was thick. I dropped her off blocks from her house, so her neighbors would not see my car, and we kissed goodbye quickly in the shadows like teenagers hiding from the world. Monday brought the first crack in our fragile peace. At the print shop, my coworker Lisa, who went to the same church, mentioned she had seen Sarah at the park with someone, but could not make out who. My stomach dropped, but I played it cool, saying it was probably her cousin. That night Sarah called in tears. "My sister saw us holding hands in the car at a stoplight," she said. She did not say anything yet, but I could tell she knew something was off. We agreed to be more careful, but the paranoia grew. My own mother started asking pointed questions about why I seemed distracted at church. I told her work stress, but she watched me closer after that. The pressure built slowly, at first small lies accumulating like sand before a dune. Sarah started canceling plans with her family, claiming exhaustion from teaching, but they pushed back, inviting her to Sunday brunch where her ex-boyfriend happened to be there. She went to keep appearances and texted me afterward feeling sick to her stomach. It felt like cheating even though we had no labels yet. I hated it, the way we were both betraying people we loved just to steal a few moments of truth. One evening we met at a secluded spot by the river on the edge of town. Sarah arrived first, and when I got there she pulled me into a hug that turned into a kiss full of desperation. "I love you, Gloria," she whispered against my lips, and the words broke something open in me. "I love you too," I said, tears streaming down my face, "but I am so scared of what this will cost." We sat on the grass talking for hours about the future we might have if the world was different, a little house, maybe adopting kids, living openly. But the world was not different and the cost loomed large. Sarah's job as a teacher in a conservative district could vanish if anyone found out. My parents had already hinted they would not support me if I strayed from the path. As the sun set, we held each other tight, knowing we were standing at the edge of a cliff, and the next step could send us over. The drive home was quiet, but when I pulled into my driveway, my mother's car was waiting. She got out and asked where I had been, her eyes sharp. "Just a drive," I said, but the lie tasted like ash. She nodded slowly, but I could see the suspicion taking root. That night I lay in bed replaying Sarah's words of love, and wondering how long we could keep this hidden before the wave we had survived at the beach came back to drown everything we held dear. The following week brought more tests. Sarah's sister cornered her at lunch, asking outright if she was seeing someone new and why she seemed so distant. Sarah deflected, but the questions kept coming. At church, my father preached about the dangers of modern temptations, and I felt every eye on me, even though it was probably my imagination. We stole another weekend away, this time to a cabin in the mountains where we could be ourselves completely. There under the stars, Sarah opened up about her past relationships, how they had always felt missing something, and how with me everything clicked into place. I told her about the nights I cried alone wishing I could be normal. We made promises to each other to be patient and strong. But deep down I knew patience would not be enough when the truth finally broke free. The secret held for another month, but cracks were spreading fast. Sarah started pulling away during the week, claiming she needed space to think, and it tore at me like thorns. I understood her fear because mine was the same, but the distance hurt worse than any argument. At work, Lisa mentioned again that people were talking about Sarah acting strange, and I snapped at her to mind her own business, which only made her suspicious. My mother invited me to a women's prayer group, and I went to keep peace, but the pastor wife talked about fighting unnatural desires, and I felt sick the whole time. Sarah called after her own family dinner where her father had lectured the table about traditional values. She cried on the phone, saying she could not keep pretending much longer. We met at the river spot again, this time under cover of darkness. She arrived looking exhausted, and when I hugged her she clung to me like a lifeline. "Gloria," I told my sister the truth, she whispered. "Not everything, but enough that I think I like women." My blood ran cold. "What did she say?" I asked. "She said it was a phase and that I needed to pray it away, and she might tell Mom if I did not stop." Sarah's voice broke. "I feel like I am losing my family already." I held her tighter, my own mind racing with images of my parents' reaction if they knew. We kissed then with a desperation that felt like goodbye and hello at the same time. The next day Sarah's sister called me out of the blue, demanding to know what was going on between us. I denied everything, but she was not convinced and hung up, saying she would pray for my soul. The betrayal stung because I had known her sister since we were kids, and now she saw me as a threat. Word spread quietly, at first whispers at church coffee hour, questions about why Sarah and I were not hanging out publicly anymore. My father sat me down one evening after dinner and asked if there was anything I needed to confess. I lied again, saying no, but the disappointment in his eyes cut deep. Sarah and I decided to cool things off for a while to throw people off the trail, but the separation only made the longing worse. She started going on awkward dates with men her family set up, and each time she texted me afterward full of guilt, it felt like a knife twist. I threw myself into a big project at work, redesigning the church bulletin to stay busy, but every design reminded me of the life I was hiding from. One Saturday, Sarah showed up at my door unannounced, her eyes red from crying. "My mom found a text from you on my phone," she said, collapsing on my couch. She did not read the whole thing, but enough to ask if we were more than friends. I denied it, but she is watching me now, Gloria. We spent the afternoon talking through options, running away, starting over somewhere new, but both of us knew we could not abandon our roots without paying a price neither was ready for. That night we held each other on the couch watching old movies, and for a few hours it felt like the beach all over again, safe and real. But morning brought reality, and Sarah left before sunrise to avoid being seen. The following week the pressure mounted higher. At school, a parent complained that Sarah seemed distracted, and the principal called her in for a talk. She came out of it shaken, saying she had to be more careful or risk her career. My mother started inviting single men from church to family dinners, and I endured them with gritted teeth, knowing it was her way of steering me back. Sarah and I managed one stolen evening at a drive-in movie far out of town where we could sit close in the dark. Halfway through the film she turned to me and said, "I cannot do this much longer, Gloria, the hiding is killing me." I nodded, feeling the same weight. "Then we have to decide what we are willing to lose," I said. The question hung between us, heavy with the knowledge that whatever we chose someone would pay. As we drove back separate cars to avoid suspicion, I glanced in the rearview and saw headlights that looked familiar. Paranoia or real, I was not sure, but the fear was real enough to keep me awake all night. The next Sunday at church, my father announced a special sermon series on family purity, and I knew it was aimed at me. Sarah texted during the service, saying her parents had scheduled a meeting with the pastor for her. Our world was closing in, and the wave we thought we had survived was building again, this time on dry land, ready to sweep away everything we held dear. The meeting with the pastor changed everything. Sarah came to my apartment afterward, pale and trembling. "He told me it was Satan tempting me," she said, sinking into the chair. "He suggested counseling and prayer sessions, and said if I did not repent, my teaching job could be in jeopardy, because the school board is full of church members." I held her while she cried, feeling helpless and furious at the same time. My own family was not far behind. My mother found a journal entry I had forgotten to hide, and confronted me in the kitchen one evening. "Is this about Sarah?" she demanded, waving the pages. I admitted some of it, but not the full truth. She cried and prayed over me right there, begging God to deliver me from this abomination. The words stung like fire, but I stood my ground, saying it was not a choice. That night my father called a family meeting, and they laid out an ultimatum: get counseling, or move out and lose their support. I packed a bag and left for a cheap motel on the edge of town, feeling like an orphan in my own life. Sarah met me there after midnight, sneaking out of her house. We lay on the thin mattress talking until dawn about the price we were already paying. She had lost her family dinner invitations, her sister had stopped speaking to her, and rumors were flying at school. I told her about my parents' threat, and she kissed me softly, saying we will get through this together. But the together was getting harder. A mutual friend from church saw us leaving the motel, and the gossip exploded. By Monday the whole town seemed to know. Sarah's principal called her in again, and this time suggested she take a leave of absence until things settled. She refused, saying she had done nothing wrong, but the damage was done. Parents started pulling kids from her class. My boss at the print shop sat me down and said clients were complaining about my lifestyle, and he had to let me go to protect the business. The betrayal from people we had known for years cut deepest. Sarah's ex-boyfriend posted vague social media rants about being led on, and her sister leaked old photos of us together with captions questioning our friendship. I confronted my mother on the phone, begging for understanding, but she said until I repented I was no longer welcome at home. Sarah and I moved in together in a tiny apartment across town, scraping by on her savings and odd jobs I picked up. The closeness should have been wonderful, but the stress turned small arguments into big fights. One night she accused me of forcing her into this life, and I shot back that she had kissed me first. We apologized immediately, but the words left scars. Family pressure intensified. Sarah's parents showed up at our door with the pastor demanding she come home for deliverance prayer. She refused, and they left in tears, calling her lost. My father sent a letter saying I was dead to them until I changed. The isolation was crushing, but it also forced us to rely on each other more. We started attending a small support group in the city an hour's drive away, where other women shared similar stories of loss and awakening. Hearing them gave us strength, and for the first time we talked about building a future, maybe moving away, starting fresh. But the costs kept mounting. Sarah received a formal warning from the school district about moral clauses in her contract, and I struggled to find new work because references from the church community dried up. One evening after a particularly hard day, Sarah broke down, saying maybe it was too much, maybe we should have stayed hidden. I held her and reminded her of the beach the moment everything became real. "We cannot go back," I said, "but we can choose how we move forward." The next week brought a new blow. A local newspaper ran a story about rising tensions in the community over changing values, and somehow our names were mentioned in the comments section. The public shaming was brutal, online messages calling us sinners, threats to the town. Sarah lost a tutoring gig she had lined up, and I was turned down for 3 jobs in a row. We sat on the floor of our apartment surrounded by bills and fear, and made a pact to fight for our love no matter the price. But deep down I wondered if love could survive when every pillar of our old lives had crumbled. The awakening was painful, beautiful, and terrifying all at once, and I knew the biggest tests were still ahead. The public exposure forced us into survival mode. Sarah and I created new routines: job hunting during the day, support group at night, and quiet evenings rebuilding trust after the fights. She found part-time work at a coffee shop in the next town over where no one knew us, and I landed a freelance gig designing for an online startup that did not ask questions. The money was tight, but it kept us afloat. Family silence turned into active opposition. Sarah's parents changed the locks on the family home and mailed her belongings in boxes with a note saying until she repented she was not their daughter. My mother left voicemails alternating between tears and anger begging me to come to counseling. We ignored most of it, but the pain of being erased by the people who raised us was constant. One afternoon, Sarah's sister showed up at the coffee shop and caused a scene, accusing her of ruining the family name. Sarah stayed calm, but when she got home she cried for hours, saying she never wanted to hurt anyone. I held her through it, reminding her that their rejection was not her fault. Our moral dilemmas deepened daily. Was it right to keep fighting when it caused so much pain to others, or were we selfish for choosing ourselves? We debated it endlessly, sometimes ending in tears, sometimes in closer connection. The group helped with stories of women who had lost everything and found peace on the other side. One woman shared how her awakening came at 40 after 20 years of marriage, and it gave Sarah hope that her feelings were valid, not a phase. We started dreaming bigger, talking about moving to a bigger city where we could live openly, maybe even get legally married one day. But the present kept pulling us back. A church member posted flyers around town with our photos labeled as a warning to parents, and Sarah's coffee shop boss asked her to keep a low profile to avoid losing customers. I received anonymous emails calling me a homewrecker, even though Sarah had not been with anyone when the kiss happened. The betrayal from old friends was the hardest. People we had grown up with crossed the street to avoid us or sent messages saying they were praying for our souls. One former classmate from high school who I thought was open-minded posted a long rant on social media tagging us both and saying we were destroying traditional values. The online storm lasted weeks, and we had to delete our accounts to escape the hate. Through it all, Sarah and I grew stronger in small ways. We celebrated tiny victories like paying rent on time or cooking a good meal together. She started writing in a journal, processing her journey from straight identified to questioning to fully embracing her love for me. I found solace in sketching scenes from our life: the beach, the river, the apartment, moments of joy amid the chaos. One weekend we drove back to Big Sur alone, this time staying in a cheap motel near the spot where the wave had changed us. Standing on the shore at sunset, Sarah took my hand and said, "This is where it started, and this is where we decide it does not end." We kissed there with the waves gentle this time, and for the first time in months the future felt possible. But returning home brought fresh trials. My father showed up at my freelance client's office demanding they fire me for moral reasons. The client stood by me, but the incident shook me deeply. Sarah faced a formal complaint from a parent at her old school pushing for her license review. We hired a cheap lawyer who warned us the fight could drag on for years, draining our savings. The trade-offs became clear. Sarah gave up any hope of teaching in this state, and I accepted that my family might never speak to me again. The awakening was complete now. We saw the world for what it was: beautiful and cruel, and we chose to stand together anyway. Late one night after another exhausting day, we lay in bed talking about the price we had paid. Sarah whispered, "I would do it again, Gloria, the kiss, the truth, everything, because being with you is the first time I feel fully alive." I kissed her forehead and said, "Me too, but the cost is real and we have to keep paying it every day." The climax was building. I could feel it in the air like another wave gathering strength, and I knew soon we would face the ultimate choice between total freedom and total loss. The final confrontation came on a rainy Thursday evening. Sarah's parents and my mother arrived at our apartment together unannounced, their faces set in righteous anger. The pastor stood behind them like a shield. They demanded we end this immediately or face permanent shunning from everyone we knew. Sarah stood tall in the doorway and said, "No, this is who I am and who I love." I stepped beside her, adding, "We have already lost so much, but we will not lose ourselves." The shouting lasted an hour, accusations of selfishness, betrayal of God and family. Sarah's father called her a disgrace. My mother wept, saying I was killing her. When they left, the silence was heavier than any scream. We sat on the couch holding each other, processing the finality. The next weeks were a blur of legal notices from the school district and church expulsion letters. Sarah lost her teaching credential after a hearing where old friends testified against her character. I watched her break that night and held her through the sobs, knowing this was the price of her awakening. My freelance work dried up completely as word spread, and we survived on food bank help and the kindness of strangers from the support group. Yet in the middle of the ruin, something beautiful grew. We applied for jobs in a progressive city 4 hours away, and both got offers, Sarah at a private preschool, Gloria at a design firm that celebrated diversity. The move was bittersweet, packing the few things we had left, saying goodbye to the town that had raised us and broken us. On our last night in the apartment, we sat on the empty floor, and Sarah pulled out a small ring she had saved for months. It was not much, but it symbolized everything. "Will you marry me, Gloria?" she asked. I said yes through tears, and we held each other, knowing the road ahead would still have storms, but we would face them together. The drive to our new life was long and quiet at first, but as the miles passed, we talked about the future, building a home where love was not hidden, creating a chosen family with others who understood. We stopped at Big Sur one last time, standing on the beach where the wave had started it all. The ocean was calm today, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Sarah turned to me and said, "Thank you for surviving the crash with me." I kissed her and said, "Thank you for pulling me into it." Our new apartment in the city was small but full of light. Sarah thrived at the preschool where her warmth was valued, not questioned. I found joy in design work that let me tell stories like ours. We joined a larger community, marched in pride events, and slowly healed the wounds of rejection. Family contact remained minimal, occasional cards from Sarah's mother with no return address, but the pain lessened with time and therapy. The awakening had cost us everything we once knew, but given us something priceless: authenticity, and a love that had been tested by fire. Looking back at the path of confrontations, betrayals, and sacrifices, I see the truth: we paid dearly, but we also gained a self we could live with. Years later, on our anniversary, we returned to the beach one more time. The waves rolled in gentle now, and Sarah pulled me close just like that first time, but this kiss was chosen, not forced by fear. As we watched the sunset, I realized the storm had passed and we were still standing. Was Sarah's kiss an act of true courage that freed us both, or was it a selfish moment that destroyed 2 families and countless relationships, leaving scars that time may never fully heal, right or wrong?